Good afternoon to everybody joining us from Africa, or good morning if you are joining us from North America. I know that we also have people who registered for this event from Asia, so good evening if you are joining us from that part of the world. My name is Andries Coetzee. I am a professor of linguistics here at University of Michigan, also the director of the African Studies Center here. There's a sense in which this panel on US-Africa exchanges is really at the core of Africa Week, right? This whole conference has focused on relationships between Africa and the United States or North America. And the theme that has run through all of these discussions has been that we live in an ever more connected world, right? What happens in the African economy impacts the world economy. We heard about that in the discussion on Monday morning between Provost Susan Collins and Vera Songwe, the executive director of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. On Tuesday morning, in the discussion between Dean Alec Gallimore of our College for Engineering and President Patrick Awuah, the founder and president of Aseshi University in Ghana, we heard how President Awuah's thinking as he was setting up Aseshi University was influenced by his experiences in the US educational system. But we also heard how Dean Gallimore was thinking about how we at the University of Michigan might want to replicate some of the initiatives that President Awuah has instituted at Aseshi University. So everything at Africa Week has focused in some way on the relationship between African and US institutions. And that really places this panel that specifically focuses on academic exchange programs between the continent and the US at the center of Africa Week. Collaborations across the Atlantic depend on institutional relationships, and institutional relationships are built on personal relationships, and personal relationships come about only through bringing people together. In this panel this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, we'll focus on different models for how this can happen between academic institutions on the continent and in North America. We'll hear from individuals with extensive experience in this domain, both from the side of African institutions, of higher education, the side of North American institutions, and also from organizations involved in funding and supporting these types of initiatives. We'll think together about what works, what doesn't work, and we will imagine what a future might look like in which these kinds of exchange programs are truly living up to their full potential of being mutually beneficial, sustainable, and equitable. The plan for our discussion is as follows. We really want this to be a discussion, so you will always see all of us together on the screen. I will start with briefly introducing each of our panelists, but I'll be very brief because after that I will ask them each to self-introduce and say something about where they are coming from to this conversation about exchange programs between Africa and the US. And then we will go, after those brief opening statements, into a discussion amongst the panelists. I will pose some questions, but in the spirit of this being a discussion, I also want to invite our panelists to respond to each other or pose questions to each other. Throughout, the Q&A function will be available. So our audience, you can find that at the bottom of your screen, and you can type questions there that you want our panelists to address. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can in the time that's available to us. But okay, let me then very briefly introduce each of our panelists before then asking them to make short opening statements and do a little bit of self-introduction. And I'll go in alphabetical order by last name. So our first panelist for this discussion is Ashley Collier, who is the lead for North American partnerships at the MasterCard Foundation. The MasterCard Foundation has been a major funder for many in the space of educational exchange programs between Africa and North America. And Ashley will therefore bring to our discussion the perspective of funders engaged in this space. Our next panelist is my colleague from University of Michigan at the African Studies Center, Henrike Floresbos. Henrike is an anthropologist and an Africanist, and her research focusing on Francophone West Africa, specifically Mali. But she's also a member of the leadership team at the African Studies Center and very closely involved there with our University of Michigan African Presidential Scholars Program, or UMAPS program, which is the cornerstone of the University of Michigan's engagement in Africa. And Henrike will therefore bring this perspective to our panel discussion. Our next panelist is Moses Usiru, who's joining us today from Nairobi in Kenya, where one of the many hats that he wears is as the manager of the Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund, or RSIF. This is a program that is supported by a consortium of African governments. And amongst the things they do is to enable PhD students, faculty from African universities, to spend time abroad during their studies. So Moses will bring the perspective of an African institution that supports these kinds of exchange programs. Our final panelist is another colleague of mine at the University of Michigan, Rockefeller Oteng. Rocky is a professor of emergency medicine here at University of Michigan. And in addition to his clinical and teaching work here at Michigan, he is also running a program that is aimed at providing capacity strengthening and training in emergency medicine in Ghana, and also building out the emergency medicine system, health system in Ghana. So he will bring another perspective about how US institutions can be involved in training and program building on the African continent. So with that as first broad introductions, I will hand over to each of the panelists to make a short opening statement, and we will again do this in alphabetical order. So Ashley Collier from the MasterCard Foundation, over to you.
Thanks so much, Andres, and thank you to all the organizers of this conference. It's an honor to be invited to be part of this panel, an honor to be with colleagues to have this discussion. So as was mentioned, my name is Ashley Collier, and I am the lead of North American Partnerships at the MasterCard Foundation. And just as a point of background for those of you that are not familiar with the MasterCard Foundation, our vision is really to build a world where everyone has the opportunity to learn and prosper. Everything that we do is founded on the belief that everyone, no matter what their starting point in life, should have an equal chance to opportunity and to dignity in the work that they do. 3 years ago, we launched our Young Africa Works strategy, and the strategy really laid out what the next decade of our work will be focused around, which is one singular goal, to enable 30 million young Africans to transition into dignified and fulfilling work, with a specific focus on young women. So there's a lot of key pillars of the work that we do. We work in financial inclusion, we work in skill development training, but one of the real core fundamental pillars is education, and working in access, but also in quality education. One of our flagship programs within our education portfolio is our scholarship program. So the MasterCard Foundation Scholarship Program, since its inception in 2013, we've supported over 35,000 young people to access higher education. So it's one of the largest scholarship programs of its kind in the world, but specifically in Africa, and supporting young Africans. So we primarily, within both the scholarship program and as a foundation, support and partner with African institutions and African-led institutions, but we also understand the role of global partnerships, global education, global opportunities for young people, which is sort of the specific role that I have at the foundation, working with North American partners, European partners, to forge these global partnerships with African higher ed institutions, and also create opportunities for young people to access undergraduate master's degrees, PhD level degrees, but also exchange programs, internships. We have sort of a whole suite of types of programs that we build with our partners. And the idea is that they would be, partnerships that are based on equity, based on equitable power dynamics. There's some fundamental values that we bring to the conversation when we think about how we devise these global partnerships, which I'll go into in the future. I'll end just by saying that we have a really ambitious goal in Young Africa Works: 30 million young people in dignified and fulfilling work, and we know that it will take a broad suite of partners, higher education partners, private partnerships, government partnerships in order to achieve that goal. And the role that we'll be talking about today is what does global education, global exchange really bring to that opportunity for young people to get into dignified and fulfilling work. So I'll stop there, and really excited to be a part of this panel and this discussion.
Thank you, Ashley. That is an ambitious goal, but one thing we've heard over and over again at Africa Week is we can only do as big as we think, so we should think big. And I think it is a big goal, but achievable. Next, I'm going to hand over to my colleague and partner from the African Studies Center, Henrike Floresbos. Henrike.
Thank you, Andries, and thank you so much already so far, Ashley. I'm also really excited to be here today and engage with you all about the exchange programs that we are all involved in. So as Andries said, I'm fortunate to work at the University of Michigan's African Studies Center, which runs the University of Michigan African Presidential Scholars Program, or UMAPS. So very briefly, how I came to this role is by having been trained as an anthropologist focusing on Francophone West Africa, first at Leiden University in the Netherlands, up to my MA, and then at the University of Michigan for my PhD. One of the things I learned in Leiden from how the African Studies Center there was organized is that you don't study Africa with just a bunch of European scholars. You want to have African scholars to be part of the academic conversation. And I think really this imperative goes well beyond African studies or the disciplines traditionally concerned with producing knowledge about Africa, such as anthropology and history, although it remains relevant to push for it there also. But really it applies to all disciplines. And this to me still seems the basic impetus for any exchange program, that the depth and breadth of scholarship expands when more people with their particular backgrounds and histories and challenges they face have a seat at the table of academia, and ideas and knowledge flow in all directions. So specifically about the UMAPS program, a little bit, that's an exchange program in the sense that it brings early and mid-career scholars employed at African universities to our campus here in Ann Arbor for 5-month-long research residencies. And then these scholars have the time, energy, and resources to work on a specific project really aligned with their own career goals, from making progress on a dissertation or getting articles published or doing specialized lab research, whatever. And it's also an exchange program in the sense of the mutual learning that happens here when the UMAP scholars become part of the U of M campus community, specifically the home departments of their UM-based faculty host, and which then of course also includes the students in these departments. So what's noticeable here, and that maybe not everybody knows, is that we at the African Studies Center and the UMAPS program specifically serve the entirety of the university, and we've placed UMAPS fellows in departments and units across almost all schools and colleges. And maybe finally, what really interests me about this conversation today is how we're coming to these exchanges from different institutional contexts. So the University of Michigan African Presidential Scholarship Program, as the name indicates, is a US university-based program, and it has been largely university funded in its first 13 years. So there's definitely a university-focused interest there. And I think it behooves us to be somewhat humble and aware of the specific constraints that come from being a US university-based program. At the same time, I want to say that UMaps was not designed solely by the University of Michigan. In fact, it was conceived from the start as a co-created, mutually beneficial partnership between the University of Michigan and its main African partner universities, at the time mostly in Ghana and South Africa. In conversations between UM's presidents and the presidents and vice chancellors of these African institutions focused on the main challenges of higher education on the continent and how best to address these challenges. And that's how the idea of having an exchange program to help strengthen the capacity of research and teaching staff at African universities was first conceived and made into the reality of UMaps. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Enrique. I like how you ended on the theme of humility, and I know from have conversations with Ashley that humility is also one of the core values for the MasterCard Foundation in thinking about these exchanges. So I think that's an important theme to keep in mind as we continue our conversation. So next, I want to move over to Moses Isiro in Nairobi, bringing for us the perspective from the RSIF program. Moses.
Thank you, Andreas, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As introduced, Moses Isiro is my name. I work at ISIPE, which is the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, based in Nairobi, Kenya, but we do have three other offices in Ethiopia, Uganda, and also now one about to start in Benin. So ISIPE was selected in 2018 to host the Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund, and which is RSIF in short. So RSIF is a relatively new program created by 10 African governments under the umbrella of a partnership of these governments called PASET, the Partnership for Skills in Applied Sciences, Engineering and Technology. And the focus of RSIF is to strengthen doctoral training, research and innovation in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's south of the Sahara, not including South Africa. The program was created and is owned by those 10 African governments, and each have contributed a minimum of $2 million US dollars, with the aim, of course, to strengthen the institutional capacity for quality and sustainable doctoral training, research and innovation in the region. So we aim to double the number of African PhDs in the next 2 decades. So it's a very ambitious goal that RSIF has set up for itself. And since we began just over 2 years ago, we've recruited 82 PhD students who have been awarded scholarships. And this year we should recruit a further 120 or so PhD students. And we hope that this number will climb to at least 300 by next year. And the focus of these awards is on existing faculty who don't have PhD, as well as women, as a means to strengthen the institutional capacity of these universities, and particularly to focus on building new departments in the orphaned or the weaker areas within the African universities. So our model is to really focus on institutional capacity building within 10 African universities that we've selected within specific fields. At present, it's agriculture and food security, climate change, mines, minerals and material science, energy, and ICT, which includes big data, artificial intelligence, etc. So the program has a really rigorous and competitive selection, and we partner with international universities and institutions like University of Michigan. Our students must spend a minimum of 6 months, but up to 24 months with doing attachments at advanced institutions in the US and other parts of the global north. And we expect them to come back with cutting edge research knowledge, strong international networks within and outside Africa, so that this will help boost their academic careers as they start their nascent careers at their home institutions. Personally, I'm a plant pathologist. Previously worked at RUForum, which is a network of over 100 African universities. And during that time, our focus also was on postgraduate training. And we benefited a lot from a number of training opportunities from the US, as well as other parts of the world, of course, including the Higher Education Partnership for Culture Development, the recent BOLOG Higher Education Program for Culture Research and Development, and many others. And I think despite the risk of brain drain and many other challenges that are linked to these collaborations, we see great value in sending students to the University of Michigan and other advanced institutions in the global north. And we also have learned many lessons in the past, which we have tweaked to ensure we can get value from it. So I really look forward to this discussion, and thank you for also having me on this panel. Back over to you, Andreas.
Thank you, Moses. All right, so we've heard a theme of humility in the first two statements, and then Moses also mentioned the very ambitious goal of doubling PhD capacity. Ashley was also talking about having ambitious goals. So it's another theme, you know, we have to think big and aim big, but be ambitious. Okay, so over to the last of our panelists, Rocky Oteng, who I've said is, you know, a faculty member from Michigan working in emergency medicine capacity strengthening in Ghana. Rocky.
All right, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel this morning, and it's great to see these folks again. So for me, I am an emergency physician trained here at the University of Michigan. I currently provide clinical care to my patients in Flint, Michigan at the Hurley Medical Center. And in the process of my work here at Michigan, I have helped to introduce the specialty of emergency medicine into Ghana. We started this work initially back in 2008, 2009, by forming what we called the Ghana Emergency Medicine Collaborative, which is basically an organization, a group formed of the University of Michigan and our Ghanaian partners. So the institutions in Ghana that would be involved in developing a brand new specialty, including the ACGME training equivalent, the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons, the Ghana Ministry of Health, the Ghana National Ambulance Service, as well as the teaching hospitals, came together with a group from the University of Michigan to form this Ghana Emergency Medicine Collaborative. In this way, we covered sort of all the people that would be involved and need to be involved in creating a sustainable training platform that would eventually build out human capacity for creating high quality in-country human capacity training for emergency medical care, with the endpoint of improving delivery of emergency medical care with in-country trained physicians, nurses, EMTs. We built and started all of this work on the idea that the amount and the value and the level of human capacity and intellectual capacity in Ghana is the same as it is here in Ann Arbor. As we started out the work, we made sure that we built it out in such a way that we would be able to provide an opportunity for our initially trainees to flourish and to gain real understanding of emergency medical systems in such a way that they could not only understand it, but then grow to own it, and then grow to expand it, not only throughout Ghana, but hopefully throughout their neighboring countries over time. As time has progressed, we've been able to help to create infrastructure and capacity around clinical research, where we help our program participants learn to try to understand why they're seeing their patients, where they're coming from, what are they coming to do, how are they being treated when they do present for emergency medical care. So we've started to build out some infrastructure around, again, capacity and training for clinical research and understanding that, and then turning that clinical research into policies that would benefit the population in Ghana. We spent time specifically creating opportunities for career development and leadership roles within the government space, such that when our folks are trained, they don't sort of find a ceiling that's artificial. We made it one of our key points to make sure that we were developing out a career that someone would want to stay in Ghana to continue to pursue after they've been provided the opportunity to train in emergency medicine. At this point, we've been successful in the sense that our graduates are playing leading roles in developing emergency medicine, both in country, as well as being asked to be experts in developing emergency medical services in other neighboring countries. During this pandemic, they've come to the forefront and have been instrumental in creating policies as well as in creating physical setups that have allowed the Ghanaian population to access high quality emergency medical care during this significant time of need. So that's a little bit about what we've done so far.
Thank you, Rocky. And for the audience who might not recognize the image behind Rocky, that is the hospital in Kumasi, Ghana, where Rocky does most of his work in Ghana. CATH, I don't remember what CATH stands for, K-A-T-H.
It's Komfo Anoche Teaching Hospital.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then a reminder to the audience, you can use the Q&A functionality on Zoom if you want to pose questions that you would like us to address. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So thank you to all of our panelists for sketching out for us the historical and also current context in which these kinds of exchange programs happen. There's so many directions that we can go, but before we delve deeper into some of these specific themes, I want to start by asking our panelists to reflect a little bit on the question of why these kinds of exchange programs, from the perspective of each of you who's coming at it from a different direction. I want to start by posing this question to Moses Usiru and Enrique Floresbos. Both of you are involved in programs that bring African scholars to American universities, to American or European, North American or European universities. Can I ask both of you to reflect on the reasons why your institutions are engaged in programs like this? Why would a US institution such as University of Michigan dedicate so many resources to bringing African scholars to our campus, right? Who benefits from that? What is the goal with that? And to Moses, why would African governments, who we've heard from you is supporting the RSIF program, why would they dedicate so many resources to enabling African students to study in the US or Europe, rather than dedicate those resources to developing institutions locally on the continent? So Moses, let me throw that over to you first. I'd like to hear your reflections on this, and then we'll ask Enrique to bring the perspective from a North American institution.
Sure. Thank you, Andreas. I think one could approach this question in a number of ways, but I'll try also to give a bit of background to the response here, to recognize that Africa has grown quite a bit, and likewise the higher education sector on the continent has also grown significantly. There's what we often talk about, massification of the higher education sector, with so many new entrants, and the demand for education has increased significantly. But there remains a challenge in terms of capacity. And this is now again where the issue of why we want these partnerships. There's a need to raise significantly the quality of education on the continent. First of all, as you said, only a few people are able to participate in the higher education sector. And then related to that then is that you also then have challenges of having enough high quality institutions that will be able to do the high level, and here I'm talking about the postgraduate training, master's and PhD level training. So what many governments have done, or many countries have approached this, is to have a kind of centers of leadership or centers of excellence type approach, where you try to define a specific focus area, topical area, thematic area, and build capacity in that area, recognizing that you don't have the resources to be able to do everything at the same time. And again, the underpinning of this is that we recognize, and many governments recognize, that science is the real development driver. I mean, there's many things are happening in terms of politics, etc., but the only real gains that we make globally and in Africa, of course, is through science. And so for this to happen, you need to build science capacity. So in the past, we've seen a lot of focus in the areas of agriculture and health, of course, and you know that there are many centers of excellence in those areas, food security and health. But some of the other areas that are interesting for Africa's development have not been covered equally. So places like, for example, mining, energy, ICT, and now the advent of artificial intelligence. So governments have recognized that we must build this capacity quickly in order to benefit from what's happening globally in this very globalized knowledge economy that we have these days. And so in order to build that capacity, you have to start from somewhere. We recognize that we don't have the capacity. So how can we benefit from what exists? So we're going out and reaching out to those places where we have that capacity. One of them, in this case, we're talking about University of Michigan, but many other institutions across the global north, and some institutions also in the global south, to see how we can try to use that to expedite or to kind of accelerate the rate of capacity building. So we're looking at how to get mentorship, how to build international partnerships, how to benefit from innovations that exist and bring this back to Africa, but at the same time, not to run into the challenges of brain drain and so on. Let me pause there, Andreas, and I'll come back.
Thank you, Moses. So that's an interesting perspective in terms of how, although you send individuals to institutions in the north, it is focused on building capacity, strengthening capacity at the institutions on the continent. So the benefit, as you see, it also reflects back to the continent. But let me then throw this question to Henrika. From the perspective of a North American institution, a large public institution such as the University of Michigan, why would we engage in these kinds of programs? I mean, for whom do we do it? Who benefits from our engagement? Why would we dedicate our resources to programs like this? I'd like to get your perspective on that, Henrika.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wanted to also thank you, Moses, for what you just said in your contribution, because that actually really sketches out the context of how UMAPS got started also, with the university vice chancellors pointing out the same issues of capacity strengthening for tertiary training, and also the need for faculty to get a reprieve from very high teaching loads brought on by massification. So I think those are really important points also from our perspective. But yeah, so why would a US institution such as U of M dedicate resources to bringing African scholars to campus? I was actually very happy to hear our president, Mark Slissel, address this in his opening remarks to the conference. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said that research-intensive universities have a big potential to make real change in the world, especially in rapidly changing fields and with regards to important challenges. And that in order to realize this potential, we need everyone at the table. So one part definitely is that we want to do these kinds of things in order to make the best research possible. And equally, if not more important, is that UM's work in Africa aligns with the public ethos of U of M as a public institution, whose mission is in fact to serve the people of Michigan and the world. So that's an argument for focusing on Africa as a really key region of the world in terms of its demographics and future prospects. And so in terms of our teaching for students to be truly ready for whatever their future careers may be, they need a global cultural awareness, and that by definition includes Africa. And finally, I would say kind of the idea of universities as providing a public good, which is entailed in being a public institution. That's also really the challenge we face, considering what we know about the systemic injustices in our own society and highly unequal global structures. So it's definitely worth thinking about how exchange programs such as ours and others operate within these contexts, and how they can strategically address them in order to create better and more just systems. I think I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you for those comments, Henrike. I like the themes that you've touched on and how they complement what Moses have pointed out, right? So how kind of the same activity, sending African academics to institutions in the North, contributes to strengthening capacity at the home institutions in Africa, but they also strengthen capacity at places like Michigan, right? Where our students now, for instance, are exposed to African thinkers, right? And not many of our students have the opportunity to travel to Africa. So it creates that opportunity for kind of democratization of the international experience for our students too. But let me pivot over and ask a question, a similar question of Ashley Collier from the MasterCard Foundation. Unlike PASET RSIF, where Moses is engaged with, and the UMAPS program that Henrike is involved with, which are both kind of university-driven initiatives. MasterCard's not an educational institution, it's a foundation. So why would a foundation be involved in this sphere? I know that for you, as you've said in your opening remarks, the foundation focuses a lot on economic development and specifically youth employment as a tool towards economic development. So, and that's reflected in the Young Africa Works strategy. So how do academic exchange programs fit into achieving that broader goal of the foundation? Or what's the role of higher education institutions in achieving the goals of a foundation like MasterCard?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, and thank you so much for asking it. So I think that my other panelists really queued up a lot of the similar thinking that we've had of what is the role of global experiences. And as you mentioned, we are a foundation. So our scholarship program, for instance, it's run through 28 different higher ed institutions, primarily of which are in Africa, but we do have several that are in North America, several that are in Europe. And we're really, our thinking on this has evolved over time as we've learned from the partners that we've partnered with that are running this program, from the alumni of the program, from, new thinking around, how do you create equitable partnerships that are based on reciprocity, similar to what has been shared before, that there is mutual benefit, whether that be at the institutional level or at the individual student and scholar level. And a lot of the original thinking was, a lot of the filters that we think about when making decisions is, skill development for the future of work. How do we ensure that young people across Africa have the skills, the mindsets, the opportunities that they need in order to transition into dignified and fulfilling work, whether that be formal work, informal work, entrepreneurship. What are the skills that are necessary? And there is absolutely a role for global experiences when we think about, the world is globalizing rapidly, even, with COVID, making us stay put for the time being. Our world is still rapidly globalizing, and there's a global marketplace. There is a need for enhanced global perspectives and global networks to really be able to maximize and achieve with an individual career. So a lot of that went into our thinking around, developing, programs with North American institutions at the undergraduate level, at the master's level. A lot of learning went into that. We design completely different types of partnerships now, addressing some of the lessons that we've learned in, whether it be addressing brain drain, what is the incentives for young people who do go to higher ed institutions outside of their home country to return back to their home country? How do you design better that transition support, those pathways back? I'll just mention one really interesting partnership that we have between a North American institution and an African institution, between Arizona State University and CanUST in Ghana, where students actually spend 3 years of their undergrad at CanUST. They come for their 4th year at Arizona State University, but they actually get their undergraduate degree from CanUST, and then they are if they have the grades, automatically registered for an accelerated master's program at ASU. So they graduate with a master's degree at ASU, which, the majority of their time was still spent in Ghana, in their home country, where they were able to build networks, build career networks, build faculty relationships, but still were able to get a global experience as well, and also the networks that they got when they went to ASU. And we see that transition back significantly higher through that program than some of our more traditional programs, where students would do a 4-year undergrad, the full 4 years, and then do their master's, and then also go on and do their PhD studies in US and Canada. And that ability to go back seems further and further away. So, I know we're going to get into learnings and how to, design and create programs further, but I just wanted to mention that we do heavily invest in African institutions in developing opportunities for young people to go to, really state-of-the-art, incredible higher ed institutions in Africa, but also see that continued role for global experiences, and how can we get more creative and more in designing programs that are really mutually beneficial. And I'll stop there.
I'm really happy that you could join us for this conversation, Ashley, because you sitting at the foundation has a view over many different of these exchange programs run through the foundation, whereas each of us have kind of detailed experience with only 1 or 2, and that broader view brings in interesting ideas. Something that you mentioned that actually then aligns quite nicely with the program that Moses runs and the UMass program at Michigan is both of those programs are also focused on students. Not everybody in the UMass program is a student still, but many are students at African institutions who get their degrees there, but spend some time abroad, right? So that's a specific model that is replicated through several of the programs here. But before we get into talking amongst ourselves, I just want to give an opportunity for Rockefeller Oteng also to reflect on this general question a little bit. So Rocky, you've been involved for many years in this program that develops emergency medicine training, but also systems, health systems in Ghana. And I believe, if I understand the program correctly, students and faculty from Michigan go over to Ghana to do teaching and learning there. But I also think that Ghanaian colleagues have come and spent some time at Michigan. So it's kind of a flow in both directions. But what I'm wondering is, why this program? Why this model? Who is this for? Is it for the Ghanaian people? Is it for the Michigan students, faculty primarily? When we met earlier, Rocky kind of put a challenge to all of us saying, a question we should all answer is, why am I doing this? Why this program? What is my program doing that otherwise wouldn't happen? So Rocky, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, It's always important, I think, when you try to get into a space. I am not the first person to try to improve emergency medicine in developing context. Um, when I was a resident at Michigan, there were a lot of other programs running. Right now, if you Google emergency medicine globally, you'll find 15, 20 other institutions here in the United States who have programs active in multiple different countries. When we set out, I specifically said to myself that I wasn't going to do the things that I had seen done that I found to be completely disrespectful, to be honest with you. I think in a lot of programs, they start off with a real mindset that like sort of permeates the work, and that mindset is, it's going to be good enough. Right. This should be good enough for Ghana. It should be good enough for Kenya. This is good enough for Tanzania. This is good enough for Ethiopia. I refuse to allow that into our program. Our program is an emergency medicine program. Our nurses are going to be able to walk into the University of Michigan from Cath and Kumasi, from our hospitals in Accra, from our hospitals in Tamale, where they've trained their whole time, walk into the University of Michigan and understand exactly what's happening and be able to pick up just like that. The differences should only be in the system that we're running here versus the system that they're running there, right? I've always thought that there's really no way for me to introduce emergency medicine as a specialty. The best that I could do is to train emergency physicians who not only understand the clinical work itself, but understand the enterprise and the idea around emergency medicine as a public health venture in such a way that they can own it and create Ghanaian emergency medicine specifically for their population. I didn't live in Ghana long. I don't understand the intricacies that happen in that culture. I do not understand a lot of things. But the people that understand it, live there, have been raised there, are part of that system. And all that we were bringing, our mindset was we were bringing the training structure around what emergency medicine can be, allowing their intellectual capacity to take over, their brilliance to take over and take what we have provided them and turn it into something that we could never have imagined. So in doing the work that we do in Why Us, and why our program, it's because that's how we started and that's how we've maintained it. There've been a lot of potential partners who we have chosen not to work with because I felt like the mindset wasn't there. They didn't share that vision. They didn't share that vision that our colleagues there truly will become colleagues in a short amount of time. We made sure that we were not going to have trainees forever, not mentees forever, but that we were creating true partners who going forward would be the ones coming up with new ideas that we haven't thought of, and we would be the ones learning from them. Our exchange programs have sort of two purposes. From the Michigan side, it gives residents an opportunity to practice in an environment where there's less structure. And let me explain that. In the United States, there are certain things that we have to do because of the medical legal culture that we live in, right? In developing settings, that medical legal culture is very different. And so sometimes as a clinician, the thing you know to be correct, you're unable to really do here in the US because it's not sort of standard of care. Let me give an example. Someone comes in and maybe they're elderly, 100 years old, and they have a significant brain bleed. They've had a trauma and they're bleeding into their brain. Okay. Everybody, even if you're not a physician, knows the outcome, right? This is not going to be something that the person walks away from and lives from. Here in the US, if that person came into my emergency department and was having trouble breathing because of the brain bleed, family member could say, hey, I want you to do everything, put them on a ventilator, do all these invasive procedures, right? And I would have no choice. I would do that happily for them. But in a way, it would hurt me because I would understand that person's final, few days maybe in this physical world would be spent completely as a vegetable, debilitated, going through procedures that in the end aren't going to change the outcome, right? But when our residents, when I practice, when I go to Ghana, in that same situation, we had an opportunity to sort of create a better situation where we would explain to the families what was happening, where we had an opportunity to explore some of the clinical skills that we've learned without, having access to all the technology right now. right? So it's a great training environment for our people here in Michigan to go there. On the other side of it, one of the things that sometimes goes unspoken is that coming from the African perspective, a training program in Africa is always somewhat felt to be inferior to a training program at Michigan, right? There's this feeling about it, and so when I went and I was like, listen, we're gonna create a training program that's a high quality standard in Ghana. A lot of people were like, well, Rocky, what if you just took me to Michigan, you trained me there? And I was like, that's not the point. The point is I could train you here just as well as I can train you in Michigan. And so to hammer home that point, our residents would come and rotate here at Michigan. And when they rotated here at Michigan, they wouldn't work with me. I wouldn't work with them clinically. They would work with the other attendings here at the University of Michigan. And at the end of the rotation or somewhere through the rotation, it never fails. It would happen where a random attending who's maybe hadn't worked with them would see them and say, hey, and say to them, hey, you know what? You're doing a great job. It's like you've always been here, right? And that bit I found in our research later on, I found that somebody saying to them or them gaining that experience and knowing that they could function in a well-developed emergency medical system just with the training that they got in Ghana really reinforced the fact that the training that they were getting in Ghana was high quality. It's a sort of a human thing where it's hard when you're in that environment and you don't have a ton of resources that you see on TV or you've heard about here and there to feel as though the training you're getting is equivalent to what someone is getting here at the University of Michigan. And during those exchanges, interacting with residents here, being part of the culture here, walking into an emergency department, working and understanding what was happening without a huge gap, I think was really huge in sort of solidifying to them that the program that they were a part of in Ghana was high quality and worth their time.
Yeah, thank you, Rocky. Ashley mentioned earlier that, I think it was Ashley, that exchanges aren't really happening now because of COVID. And we're all, meeting on Zoom, which is what made this whole conference possible. But something that Rocky mentioned now, I think is something that all of us believe in, that personal experience of walking into the emergency department at the University of Michigan or at Cath in Kumasi. And that goes beyond the content of the academic training. But that is part of the value of exchange programs. And that's why I'm really looking forward to the end of COVID so that in-person exchanges can happen again. But I want to follow up on something else that Rocky mentioned. He said that, he's been approached by many institutions who would like to partner with him. And, he thinks carefully about who to partner with. I know that's generally true of how we think at the University of Michigan. When we are thinking about whom to partner with, we're looking for institutions who share our values and vision of the world and higher education. But I want to throw this question to Moses and think about this from the perspective of an African institution, organization, such as PASET RSIF. So as North American and European institutions are realizing the central place of Africa, there's this rush from the North to find partners in Africa, to engage in Africa. How does an African consortium such as PASET think about selecting their partners? So what do you look for? Because I'm sure you are inundated with more requests for partnership than you can accommodate. And I know that RSIF takes this seriously because we just recently went through the process of applying to be a partner in RSIF, and they subjected the University of Michigan to a rigorous evaluation. So Moses, how do you think about selecting your partners outside of Africa? What makes a good partner for you?
Thanks, Andreas. This is an interesting question because I think this will not always be the situation, and I think we've also begun to see this with some parts of the world. For example, when we partner with places like some European countries like Norway and Sweden and so on, that as the landscape in Africa is beginning to change, you find a lot more people beginning to look out for partnerships. And I think then you begin to realize that actually there are beginning to be quite a number of seekers on the African side, which you may not necessarily always find the opposite on the other side. But coming back to the specific question, we have certain things that we're looking for, of course, because the African governments also have made very clear what their intention and ambition of the program is. And to mention some of them, of course, we are looking for academic excellence, and this goes without saying, which is normally not as easy to find as you would assume, and also the contribution of that institution to knowledge globally. So a number of institutions are focused within a specific area, but don't have necessarily a focus globally. So this is one specific criteria that we look for. Secondly, we also like to find an institution that has or already has plans to focus on Africa, and particularly to develop higher education and research and those focus areas within its ambit. So for example, University of Michigan already has this, for a long time you've been working with Ghanaian and South African, and now many other universities are part of your partnerships. So that's what we're looking for. We want to develop a long-term partnership. So we look for someone who is also looking to have a focus on Africa. And to see this also, we want to see a strong record of international partnerships, because it's always easier with someone who has that experience. And this also comes to one of the lessons that we've learned, that we are also looking for, we recognize that partnerships are also based on individuals. So when you have people who have a record of international partnerships, you also have an idea of what they're looking for and what they've learned over the past that you can benefit from. And then the other one I'll mention lastly, there are a number of others, but I'll stop here, is to mention that we're also looking for an institution that has similar focus areas. So for example, PhD programs that are very much aligned with the thematic areas that we are interested in within our African host universities, so that we can have this collaboration, long-term partnerships developing between the Northern institution or the American institution with our African host universities. So let me stop there for now, Andreas, back over to you.
Thank you. So I am going to try to weave in some of the questions that are populating in the Q&A, and rather than posing one specific question, I'm picking up on themes that I'm seeing coming up in a couple of the questions. And one of our questions specifically comment on the fact that all of the programs that we've been talking about here, or most of them, are focused at graduate students, PhD students, medical specialization, or the UMAPS program even is focused on faculty who've already attained their PhDs. So kind of at the more senior level of student, or even post-student academic, and therefore kind of by design engage with a small number of individuals. So what about the very large number of undergraduate students in Africa, but also in the US, right? So do we have to think about exchange programs going down to the level of undergraduate students? And one of our questions even asks, and what about high school students? Kind of that pipeline feeding into the higher education system. Should we, does it behoove us to expose African high school students and US high school students also already to exchanges? And maybe I'll throw this to Ashley, because I know the MasterCard Foundation do also have a large focus on undergraduate lower level students, not just at the graduate level. So, what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, so the majority, so I said before that we had, the majority of the scholarship program, there's 35,000 scholarships that's been committed to date. We just committed another 15,000 last year at the higher ed level, the majority of which are at the undergrad. understanding that this access to higher education is still a huge challenge, and there's still, it's a very low percentage of young people that are able to transition into higher education. But even within that, number of undergraduate, scholarships that we provide, a much smaller section is actually for a global experience. The majority of our scholarship program are run through African institutions that in some cases have global exchanges, a summer exchange as a part, but we really take the approach of co-designing and co-creating with individual institutions the program itself. So understanding the needs, understanding the opportunities that currently exist within the institution where they see opportunity to expand, to grow. The idea is not only to provide more opportunities for individuals, but also work at the institutional level as well, and to work with others to shore up more opportunities. There's only so much one individual organization, founder, or foundation can do. So the idea is that, that's where system change comes in. We used to actually in the past work at the secondary level through scholarship programs as well, and very quickly pivoted and said, access in secondary isn't necessarily through a scholarship, is not necessarily the right way to make scalable and sustainable change. And instead working more directly through ministries of education, supporting teacher training, supporting digital enhancements at the secondary level, looking at different aspects to improve quality, to improve graduation rates, to improve transition rates once you graduate either into higher education or into the world of work. Those are, so there's a need to be very contextual. Every country is different. Every program needs to be different and adapted to what the needs are, what the opportunities are. And I think that that's, when we think about scale, and when we think about the depth of the need, especially at the accessing higher education, there's also the need on the other side too of that transition. Once you've graduated from, you have your undergrad, you have your master's degree, does that necessarily mean that you're going to graduate into a job? And what is that transition support? And some of these global exchanges are where we see some of the keys to success. Not always, not across the board, but I do think that there's a huge role in providing these types of exchanges to enhance skills, to enhance networks and opportunities. But again, the mindset that we have is listening, humility, co-creation. Everything needs to be unique and tailored to the needs of individuals. So or to institutions and to countries. So that's sort of our approach, but we do, understand that, the accessing and the higher undergraduate level is a key thing that we're trying to address.
Thank you, Ashley. There's so much that one can follow up on that, but Moses, I think you want to quickly add to this.
Yes, please, because I think we've been kind of mentioned also in this question. And the approach of RCIF is also looking at scale. Although at present we have 300 students in the next year or so, but the focus is on building African higher education institutions, and particularly universities. That some of these universities have student numbers of 100,000 and so on, but we need to lead this with knowledge. So we're trying to build that cadre of PhD qualified staff who will go back and support training within these African universities based on context and based on knowledge. So our plan is to train between 20,000 to 40,000 PhD students in the next 20 years. And those students will go back to different institutions across the continent. At present, we've mobilized about 60 million. And the African countries are continuously contributing to the pot, and we're creating an endowment fund. And this endowment also will keep this sustainable going into the future. Let me back to you, Andreas.
Thank you for that, Moses. So we only have about 10 minutes of time remaining. I thought an hour and 15 minutes is long, but it goes by very quickly. So there's one more topic that I really want us to think about, and that's funding all these exchange programs. So I want to pose a question about that, and then ask the panelists who have something to say to contribute to that. And then I also want to allow each of you at the end just, a minute or so to make a closing statement, reflections upon our discussion that you might want. But the topic that I would like us to still specifically address is funding, right? It's kind of the proverbial elephant sitting in the corner of the room. All these programs that we talk about cost money, right? We have to be able to fund and support these programs. And as all of us know, working in this space, it's not easy to do so, right? So these programs are programs that invest in people, in individuals, in human capacity building. And often the measurable outcomes from these investments for their impact on society, for instance, is years or decades down the line from when the initial investment happens. So how do we talk successfully to funders about this, right? We need a specific kind of funder who is willing to kind of wait for the deliverables, to have this kind of future vision. So maybe, Ashley, as somebody who works with a foundation that funds these programs, can say something about that. But then I also know that Rocky, for instance, has been very active in trying to gain funding from foundations. So also like to hear from you, Rocky. How do you present your program to funders such that they are willing to fund you now for a deliverable that's years down the road? But first, let's get to Ashley.
Sure. I love this elephant in the room that usually gets thrown to me. And I'll do my best to provide some thinking that might be helpful from our foundation. We certainly, I only represent the MasterCard Foundation. Every major foundation has their own approach to the way that they build out their strategies. And I actually want to comment on something that Rocky said earlier about shared vision. And I think that that's one of the most critical things when you think about even who you reach out to as a funder. Do you have a shared vision of both what you're trying to accomplish, the impact that you're trying to have, but also how you're trying to do it? The how is just as important as the end result. Is it respectful? Is there dignity? Is there humility? Is there true listening and co-creation that's happening? And not everyone is, has similar understandings or visions of how to go about building partnerships and the role of global education. There's hard choices that you have to make as well. We all do. But as a funder, there's also, when we think about sustainability, scale, these are, huge. When our goal is 30 million young people into dignified and fulfilling work, that's a huge number. It's also just a drop in the bucket of the number of young people in Africa that are also looking for work. So we, are beholden to the fact that we have funds, but we have to make hard decisions about where is the best way to allocate these resources, and really truly listening to those that have much more of the answers than we do, and being steered in not just what we think is the best, but what our incredible partners are thinking, what young people are desiring, what the aspirations of young people are, and be directed in that way. So I don't have a real, answer of make sure you say this on your grant proposal to secure the funds, but I do think that shared vision, mission, and understanding of how to get there is really critical when you think about not just partnerships between those that are implementing, but also the partnership with those that are funding as well.
I love that, right? It's really connecting very well to what other members of the panel have said about choosing partners, is finding people who have shared values, who align goals. So clearly the partnerships is not just between the exchanging partners, but also with the funders, and again then looking for that shared values. But Rocky, I wonder if you can bring some perspectives from your experience in looking for funding to support your program. How do you engage with funders to talk to them about why they should invest in a program like yours, which trains individuals, although the goal is larger for society, right? So how do you make that jump from investing in individuals for a longer term societal benefit?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And Ashley, I'm sorry. As soon as he asked the question, I was like, oh, let's wait to see what Ashley's going to say. But funding is everything. I mean, a lot of it for me has been learning how to communicate with potential funders, right? I think in the little bit that you've heard me, I have a significant passion for what I do. I know. In my head, I know exactly what emergency medicine and emergency medical systems development can mean to these populations. I know what it means here, right? And we have a lot of other support systems. And imagine what it could mean in a society where there's less support systems, to have a real foundation that creates a safety net, where all of a sudden, within a 5-year, maybe 6-year, 10-year course of time, a country can have emergency medical care, right? Like everybody there could have access to someone who knows exactly what they're doing. They've been specifically trained to do this thing. Imagine all the lives that we could save and all the lives that we can improve, right? One of the things when I do the work, as I've matured in this process, and maturation for me is a hard thing, but as I've matured in the process, is trying to communicate, as Ashley said, trying to communicate a vision that is something that is shared by the foundation that we're trying to approach, right? If the foundation that we're approaching is really interested in children, right? They're like, children really want to make sure that the kids are being taken care of and the children are getting the best of care. And I'm like, great. Every emergency department in Africa or in Ghana, let me speak specifically, takes care of children. We take care of children. And the percentage of people who suffer life-altering injuries who would go on to develop disability for the rest of their lives happen in the age group that you're worried about, 14 to like 40. Right. So at the lower end of that, those are the kids you're worried about, who, if they break their arm and there's nobody there to set it appropriately, they will no longer be able to use that arm for their full potential for the rest of their lives. If you invest in an emergency medical system, we'll have someone there who's trained well enough to set it appropriately to get them to, and if they can't do it appropriately, we'll get them to the appropriate orthopedic surgeon who can do it because they recognize it. Right? Sometimes it's not about me fixing something. It's about me finding it soon enough and recognizing the potential badness if we don't get it fixed. So it's sort of not changing the message, but shaping and packaging the message, a portion of the overall message, in such a way that it's able to be absorbed by that foundation. Because not everybody, clearly, not every foundation is interested in capacity building, right? It's hard sometimes to go to them and be like, listen, there's this population here that you've never heard about, you don't even know anything about. And this thing that I'm going to do is going to give them a building block from which they can increase their GDP. Right? I've gone to some foundations about that, because if you look at growing a nation from like a low income country to the next level, low middle income or middle income even, you have to have a large segment of your population reaching working age working. Right? So not only do they have to have, job availability, be able to fill those jobs, but they need to be healthy enough to get to that point and work. And if they're not working or not healthy enough to work, how do you increase your GDP? All right. So the same message is there. It's just, how do you package it in such a way that it can be absorbed by the foundation? I will tell you, it's been frustrating, because I've seen in the space, I've seen a lot of my colleagues have a lot of foundational money. And there's some who have foundation money to do emergency medical things in Ghana. Yet when I go to the places that they've been working on for 10 years, I'm like, wow, nobody here can say that the last 10 years have been any sort of improvement to them personally, much less to the system that is being created. So, if I would say anything to the foundations, and I try to, it's their money, they can do whatever they want with it, right? But what I always try to bring out is that, look at the work we've done in the little bit of time, like the impact that we've made, right? Like, I think it's behooves us to always bring to the foundations evidence, right? Because it's a nice idea. It's great. You want to help people, but what's the evidence? What's the impact that you've been able to make in the little bit of time that you've been doing this, or with the little bit of seed funding that you were able to receive?
Thank you, Rocky. And we are just about out of time. We have 1 minute left. So Moses, Ashley, and Enrica, I'm going to give each of you like 15 seconds to have a final say. Enrica.
Mine is less than that. good universities and good places to do X can really be anywhere in the world, like emergency medicine in Kumasi, and institutions can learn from each other. So I think exchange programs can be the bridge between those 2 points and make them both happen.
Thank you. Moses, last words.
Yeah, I think just to say that what is critical is to build really good and long-term partnerships. And I think when you do that, you'll be able to achieve a lot of the results that you'd like to achieve, rather than the other way around, thinking more about just results, because then in the long term, I think you don't benefit much. So thanks, Andreas.
Thank you. And Ashley.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andreas, and to this entire panel. This was a joy to be on. I'll just quickly say, last week I was a part of a co-creation workshop where we had several African partners as well as North American partners. And in one of the plenaries, a question was posed: what would it take to create a truly equitable partnership? And how would we know if we succeeded in that? And some of the words that came out are, respect, dignity, recognition of power dynamics, truly valuing different knowledge systems, information systems, cultures, and the collective vision. And I just wanted to share that because, much more wisdom came from that conversation than I would ever espouse to have. But every time that I've seen something, a partnership work, it has all of those elements. And every time that I've seen a partnership go through some really deep challenges, it's because one or multiple of those values were not adhered to throughout the entire partnership. So that's something that we really keep in mind as we continue to build global partnerships in the future.
Thank you, Ashley. And that is kind of a perfect way in which to end this panel, which was about successful exchange programs. And Ashley just kind of articulated the core values that make these programs succeed. So thank you to our panelists and to everybody who participated. I'm really sorry that we didn't have time to get to more of the audience questions. Clearly, we should have made this a 3-hour-long discussion, although I think then we would have lost audience members because 3 hours is too long. So thank you for listening in. We will now have a 15-minute break, I believe a 15-minute break before our next session, which will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. That will focus on the reclamation and repatriation of African art. So take a break, stretch your legs, but please don't log out from the Zoom link because we will continue at the same link in 15 minutes. Thank you, Ashley, Henrika, Rocky, and Moses. Thank you very much.